Rocked by pricing scandals, bombed by reviews, was Mario Kart World the right choice for a launch title for the Switch 2? There's no doubt that it will be a huge seller, and while it might not quite match Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, what does, we can anticipate it being a big deal for many years to come. I have no doubt that Nintendo will add to it and develop it as time goes by. And yet, while Mario Kart World is fantastic, there does seem to be a sense that the game hasn't quite gripped people for the long term with an absolute wall of content. Should Nintendo have gone for a different launch title? One thing that's worth making clear is that I think there is, for Nintendo at least, a definitive answer to this, although I doubt we'll ever know this, as Nintendo will want to retain their secrecy. They have all the statistics about everybody's playtime, and they will be very able to see if anecdotal reports are borne out that people are pivoting to a different game after a relatively short time. I imagine that these metrics must have some bearing on their internal assessment of the reception of the game, and these are far more hard metrics to game or to write off than entitled review bombers dropping a few bad reviews or people talking down the game based on abstract vibes. Still, even without having Nintendo's data to our fingers, we can probably draw some of our own conclusions on the success or otherwise of this choice of launch title. Going back to the Switch's launch, there was a clear difference in the standing of its launch title even after a month. There was a title with real heft in Zelda Breath of the Wild. People might have moaned that Switch was, air quotes, just a Zelda machine, as if just having one of the century's best games was some terrible hardship, but scarcely anybody voiced doubts that the game itself was top draw. Breath of the Wild was a single player experience that was genuinely huge in scope. When I first bought my Switch, it was weeks before another game was going to be released, but I didn't even particularly want to change it up, and I think I racked up 120 hours in Breath of the Wild before finishing it, and even then, I was less than halfway done with my Breath of the Wild experience. Mario Kart World so far just isn't like that. If you enjoy playing competitive multiplayer, then obviously the game has endless fun to offer. But while there is a lot of content by comparison to most games, and even compared to past Mario Kart games, for a AAA debut title, I don't know that the one-player content is quite as strong as has become the standard over recent years. It's also relatively unusual from Nintendo not to have a significant single-player option at launch. Super Mario World, Super Mario 64, Luigi's Mansion, Zelda Twilight Princess, even New Super Mario Bros. U were single-player focused, although there's quite a range of quality here. Now, I would certainly argue that Mario Kart World is a stronger single-player experience than New Super Mario Bros. U, and the sheer size of the games means that there is an awful lot to do, but while Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour is fun, it feels odd that we've had to wait for Donkey Kong Bonanza for a proper single-player epic to come along. On the other hand, it feels very clear to me why Mario Kart was the best choice for this particular console. It's not because Mario Kart sells gangbusters, though it does, because after all, the early adopters of Switch 2 were the people who are likely to buy the console anyway, so in this respect, it's largely immaterial which game they partner it with, as long as it's one of the dozens or so franchises that can stir the passions of the core fans. Given the expectations coming off Switch, I think Nintendo could have put this out with Xenoblade, Fire Emblem, or even Metroid Prime, and it would still have been flying off the shelves in the first week at a rate that's not too dissimilar, although the rate of adoption would likely slow more abruptly after the initial enthusiasm dies down. Of course, for momentum's sake, you want Kart out there ASAP, but it didn't hurt the Switch to have to wait 8 weeks for the title, and heck, even on Wii U, Mario Kart 8 was comfortably the biggest selling title on that system, despite taking around 18 months to even hit. No, the big thing for me is Game Chat. Now, Game Chat is evidently a feature that Nintendo wants to push big time, and as I've said previously, I think the measure of this feature's success won't be how it performs in the short term, but how it performs years and even decades from now in giving people a method of communicating which ties into their experiences of Nintendo. The nostalgia of playing these games with your friends is something they want their system to be right at the heart of, and Mario Kart is the perfect game for this kind of thing. But you want all the early press, all the early images to centre around not just Mario Kart, but the crossover of Mario Kart with game chat as a new experience. Even those people who only have casual awareness of Mario and Mario Kart will hopefully see an odd advertisement, and the thing that may stick out as new and different to this casual fan base is not necessarily the characters or the graphics or the open world, but the idea of communicating over your gaming system. It's easy for the more hardcore players to shrug their shoulders at this, but I think the option for communication hits differently if you're not as interested in Mario Kart in and of itself. Now, you may say, these people aren't buying Switch 2 anyway right away, so why do we need Mario Kart World so early? Well, familiarity, far from breeding contempt, generally breeds liking. Nintendo know that people will need several exposures to their new concepts, and so having it be a big focus on Mario Kart makes sense. Plus, it's not like players could exactly meet up to share Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. I mean, they could, but why would they? So for that reason alone, I think Mario Kart World was the correct choice of launch game, but we also need to consider the counterfactuals. There are a very small number of franchises which are capable of launching a new system. The 2D Super Mario Bros. Series is one, and theoretically they could have held over Super Mario Bros. Wonder, but after the anemic launch of Wii U, I don't think they would want to invite the comparison by launching another system with a 2D Mario. Besides, Wonder is great, but it's not capable of the kind of graphical wizardness that puts all doubts to rest on buying a new system in terms of its graphical quality. They could, in theory, have held back Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, but apart from the fact that an 8-year wait for that title seems absolutely torturous, having a sequel console alongside a game that was a very obvious sequel in itself, down to reusing the same world, might risk feeling a little bit too samey. I absolutely adore Tears of the Kingdom, but it very much colours within the lines of Switch. Plus, it had already been announced as a Switch game, and while Breath of the Wild did okay being cross-platform, I think for Switch 2, where there isn't a form factor that's significantly different, they needed something more distinctive. Then there's 3D Mario, which appears to be in the wind, and Donkey Kong Bonanza, which looks amazing, but Donkey Kong, even at its height, doesn't scream Nintendo in the same way that Mario does. A game like Donkey Kong Bonanza would draw attention from the core fans and also from other people who discover it by reputation, but as a day one purchase, it feels less than ideal in terms of its reach. If anything, a more obvious debut game was Metroid Prime 4, which could model mouse mode and the graphical features of the Switch 2, but this is also cross-platform and a rather niche experience. On the other hand, they could have gone for another Switch Sports or equivalent, but this would hardly be a one-player epic either. Pokemon Legends ZA wouldn't work either, as although Nintendo effectively exerts control on the Pokemon Company, it doesn't own the company outright, and so they couldn't have quite the same degree of absolute control of a title in the same way that Mario Kart World would afford them. I think Mario Kart World also was ideally placed to cushion the cost impact of the machine on consumers. Now, this may sound odd as its price created some consternation, but by packing it with Switch 2, they managed to get the $500 price point for the system that I think they always felt they needed to get for Switch 2 if possible, but softened it by including a game packed in. Well, even if you bulk at dropping $80 for the game, you can't really complain about $50 Mario Kart World. Any other launch title might not have had the same pack-in appeal, plus, logistically, they would have needed new packaging and new bundle announcements for the inevitable time when they start packaging in Mario Kart World, given that Mario Kart has always been a truly reliable pack-in experience. And beyond launch, the potential of Mario Kart World is huge for what I would term micro-announcements. New costumes, new characters, 200cc, videos revealing how to do tricks or secrets, whatever else it may be. This is what it feels like Nintendo today really required, and while there are lots of games capable of supporting this level of continual updates, none match Mario Kart for the potential for long-term, continuous new drops, and frankly for the appeal of lots and lots of cartoony characters who are going to look good in quick promos. I adore Donkey Kong and Pauline, of course, but the Mario Kart cast is huge and only likely to grow. Ultimately, I can't see that Nintendo had another credible option up their sleeve, and even if they did, Game Chat suits Mario Kart World so much more than other titles might, and so I do think it made sense as the launch title. I also fully expect them to continue to support the game for the long term, not necessarily right off, but in dribs and drabs across the console's life, including, ultimately, DLC and more. By constantly bringing people back in, they will not only extend the longevity of the title, but it will also potentially cause people to pick up Switch 2 and check out other titles at the same time. Therefore, even if the game at launch is relatively slight in terms of content, and this really is incredibly relative given how huge a game it really is, a constant low-level drumbeat of support will be helpful to it. Through social media and Nintendo Today, Nintendo have a lot of opportunities to make this work for them for the long term. Thanks as ever for being here. If you'd like to support the channel, do check out the Patreon, but otherwise I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.